One of your early slides about Bunker Hill,
Yeah.
and then a later slide that showed lead prices and trend lines for lead levels of lead, showed a plateau between 1976 and 1984, and I wonder what happened or didn't happen during that time frame.
So I didn't work at the Bunker Hill site during that time because but I can tell you, I can give you an answer. Although Ian would be the best person to give you that answer. Plateau. So there's different. Actually, this is an interesting point because there's different types of interventions that can be done at a site. It's not just remediation alone. So what happened right here? This is the plateau you're talking about.
Yes.
What happened right here is one, the smelter stopped operating, but also there were health interventions that were put into place before remediation happened. And that's what we're looking at doing in Curious Dam as an interim stopgap measure. So there's things you can do to reduce exposures. You can talk about reducing dust in the home, so you can provide, in Bunker Hill, providing vacuum cleaners. But you can encourage wet mopping, you can encourage hand washing between meals or frequent hand washing, all these things to reduce exposures. You can stop kids from visiting really contaminated sites, put a fence around them. There's really simple measures you can do to kind of reduce some of those exposures. And that's what you're seeing here, is that health intervention. And it brings it down to a certain level. And that's what we're going to try and do in Kyrgyzstan until or if there's any desire from the government to do more remediation. But then this is when, in '84, so right in here somewhere is when remediation started. And that's where you start to see more drop in blood levels.
Yeah, that seems like a long time.
Yeah, yep.
You start that at 70 micrograms per deciliter. Do you know what the blood lead level, average blood lead level in the United States, especially in urban areas, was pre-1972 when we took lead out of leaded gasoline?
It wasn't that high, but it was certainly elevated. And I don't actually, you know what, I do have that.
I always use the saying in my talks that that's why all us old people are goofy, is because we were all leaded.
You think you have that excuse, don't you?
Based on present standards, anyway.
Yes.
I
So
see it at the bottom there, the gold line.
yeah, and there's a better graph somewhere here.
Yeah, you're right, but the problem is it starts at 76.
Oh.
I know. Well, and that is part of the challenge too. It's just when there's data for it. But Bunker Hill was definitely above the U.S. national average. But the other really interesting thing about that question is what we considered to be a safe level of lead in blood at that time, which is not 5.
But any major highway in the United States, even today, as many years as it's been, if you take a soil sample off the side and you run it, you'll find lead. And it's the type of lead that you're looking at. I run into problems with this. There's lead and then there's lead.
Not going to be
And
able
I'd
to
be very
find.
interested to know what the mineral species is that the lead is in and the lead gold system that you're talking about. Because
So
to get lead poisoning from lead sulfide, which is galena, the standard mineral that is mined for lead, is very difficult.
it's lead oxide in the gold ore that we see in Nigeria, which is more bioavailable. The lead in gasoline is tetraethyl lead, which is on the extreme end of what's absorbed in the intestinal tract, right? Lead oxide is somewhere in the middle there. So it is something that is absorbed into the system and into the blood.
Well, in the Coeur d'Alene district, for example, we talk about lead. There was certainly a lead issue up there. But it was lead poisoning out of the smelter and out of the zinc plant, not from the mines. The
Right.
miners died from emphysema, from the dust that they were getting off
Silica,
drilling, but not from lead poisoning.
Right. No, it's when it's smelted that it becomes
The litharge,
oxidized.
which comes out of that smelter, which is the problem with when they ran the plant without the baghouse in it. Litharge is lead oxide.
Yep.
That's the character that gets you.
Yep.
So I'm just curious as to what is this thing in Africa that they're looking at? What is the mineral species that they're looking at?
It is a lead oxide. It's not a sulfide. There is a galena mine that has lead
Lead
sulfide.
oxide in nature is really rare.
I know, but it's an oxidized vein. It's a weathered vein of ore that's being accessed.
You don't know what the mineral species is that it's in?
It's funny, I just had this, I gave the same presentation a couple of weeks ago, and a mining
Sorry,
geologist.
I don't want to
No,
take
no,
up
no.
right now.
I have the rock on my desk. So you come by the office, and I have a bunch of papers that were published by USGS on this site. And so I'd be happy to share it with you. You get in touch with me.
I'll
Yeah.
give you my card. I'd
Yeah.
appreciate it if you send it to me.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Let's go back here. Sorry.
Oh.
So if you were going to make one suggestion to the average citizen consumer that would positively affect that situation, this situation, what would you recommend?
One is tough.
But you have more, I was just.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is the amount of stuff we consume. So we can talk about recycling and doing recycling more responsibly and trying to understand where our electronic waste ends up and who's breaking it down. But I would say before that, the best thing that can be done is just think about if we need a new phone every 6 months or a year, or you know, when we look at textiles, because it's not just about electronics, our consumption of those things, that it has an effect upstream and downstream. And so I think the amount of stuff that we consume is just amazing nowadays when you think about it. And that, to me, I think would be an answer for a lot of different issues, is reducing what you're consuming. So a lot of it isn't necessary, right? It's nice, but it's not necessary. Yeah.
Okay, I want to be in the line.
Okay, good. Go ahead. And then Sandra.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about how, are there any organizations, maybe Doctors Without Borders, dealing with the long-term health effects of people who were contaminated by these mines, and you know, maybe lessons learned from Bunker Hill, and how that's translating down the years to Nigeria and so forth?
In terms of global organizations, maybe not. That's, again, that's why we've really tried to work with the Nigerian government on this. These villages that we work in Nigeria, they don't have a lot of infrastructure. They don't have a road going to them, pretty limited clinic structure, pretty limited, if any, educational system. So getting in there with resources for kids who are lead poisoned to try and, because there's certain educational interventions and behavioral interventions you do when they're young. I think that's kind of what you're asking about.
Right, preventative, but then there's some people that got lead.
Right, exactly. And so then looking at how you can give essentially special education and behavioral intervention to try and counteract some of those long-term impacts of lead exposure. That's really a missing component of the project, but also one we're still pushing and hoping for in terms of government intervention down the line. And so we haven't neglected it, but it is something that all of us are haunted by, I think, and want to see happen in those communities. I'm not aware of any international organizations that deal with that side of exposures. You know, Doctors Without Borders is really an emergency humanitarian group, so that's outside of their scope as well. But that's a good question. That's something I think we're looking into.
You know, those Bunker Hill stats, were they for children, the blood level?
Yeah, those are kids' blood levels.
Okay, so there's still, you know, spikes in certain areas or individuals?
Yeah, so they still do blood lead monitoring, and people to talk to about this would be Alta Science and Engineering, which is like the arm that TerraGraphics became, the engineering company. They work with the Panhandle Public Health District on looking at blood lead trends. They do occasionally see some spikes, although spike being relative to what it was before. They see it sometimes approaching the national average or exceeding the national average a little bit, but nothing like some of those graphs we looked at earlier. But that's really something that somebody who's familiar with that data should speak to, because I'm not as involved with Bunker anymore. Okay, do it, that's Sandra.
In your introductory slides, you commented that TerraGraphics started in the 1980s, and then you mentioned that this foundation, International Foundation, is a natural offshoot of that, and stuck in there it said it was a non-profit.
Yep.
Now, non-profit or for-profit, payrolls have to be made.
Yep.
And whatnot. And is there a form of, is this everything that TerraGraphics is now, or is there still a part of TerraGraphics that is basically a for-profit corporation doing this?
So yes, TerraGraphics is now called Alta Science and Engineering. They're based in the post office building, and they still do work in the US at mining sites here in the United States. So they still do the same thing, like at Bunker Hill, they do stream bed restoration, they do the same work, the amazing work they've always done. But we have no connection to them anymore. Not for any like sinister, terrible reason. They're great friends. We love them. But because of nonprofit status, we had to be really clear in our separation because we can't be in some way like an R&D budget for TerraGraphics engineering, right? So we're a totally separate entity, and we work internationally in TG. Alta Science and Engineering works in the U.S. But yeah, we're not. We don't partner on projects. I still do a little work for Alta Science and Engineering. I think they're a great company.
Is there an endowment or something like that that gives
Oh,
you
to
some
fund
ongoing?
TIFO? So TIFO was funded in a couple ways. One, when Ian and Margaret sold the business, they put part of the sales into TIFO to give it a kickstart. We also have, we received money for specific projects we do. The Nigerian government paid us for our time to work in Nigeria. So money that's wired from Nigeria to the U.S. has actually happened at least once that we know of, rather than vice versa. It was pretty amazing that they paid for it, but they really did pay for our time. In Kyrgyzstan, Dr. Without Borders is supporting us for our time. So we always do this at a humanitarian rate, which is always a loss for us. So we take donations here locally as well, and we do fundraising here locally to raise the funds. That's a good question. Sandra?
Sure. You know, I was really struck when I was watching what was going on in Nigeria, especially to the point where they have their uniforms. And I thought, how hard was that to make people buy into that? This is what you're going to wear. You're going to shower before you go home. This is what you're going to do your home, because that just seems like that would have taken a lot of effort in and of itself.
Yeah, it's yes and no. So in the beginning when we got there, children were dying and incredibly sick. I mean, severe lead poisoning kids are they're encephalopathic. Their brains are swelling, so they're going into seizures and into comas. So there was an immediacy and a need, and people were really looking for assistance in addressing the issue. Over time, lead poisoning is a silent disease, right? So now we're seeing lead levels that are much lower, that are still orders of magnitude above what we see here in the U.S. And so it becomes a little bit more challenging later in the project, just like working in any kind of public health realm where you're looking at HIV prevention, where people don't see the immediate effects of the disease, so it's a harder thing to work on preventing. Lead poisoning is the same in that regard. The uniform thing was pretty easy because if they wanted a job, that was part of the job, right? So we had certain rules. You had to wear a dust mask, you had to wash your hands before you ate lunch, you know, really basic things, and that was part of the deal. And it was great money for them to be doing this remediation. So the locals were employed to work in their own homes and in their neighbors' homes. And that provided great additional income to mining, which they were doing on the side. So, yeah. Was there? Yes.
And just to plug TerraGraphics, I'm reasonably familiar with what your company did up at Bunker Hill.
Okay.
And the state really owes you guys, owes Ian and company a vote of gratitude on that, because you were the state contractor on that.
For a long
And if
time.
it hadn't have been for you guys trying to keeping the Fed straight up there, with a lot of sweat, and it was not always easy,
Yep.
that cleanup would not have gone anywhere near as well as it did. So
I'm going
you
to tell
guys
you
did
that
a
you
super
said that.
job.
Yeah, he'll appreciate that. I worked for them for a short time before I moved to nonprofit, so I didn't spend too much time at Bunker, just one summer. But yeah, I think you will.
The picture of the Bunker Hill smelter that everybody uses,
Yeah.
that's my picture.
Is it really? Oh, wow. Well, yeah, I'd like to chat with you later to see your background and how that came to be. But Mary, did you have a question, or was there another one? No. I can hang out for a little while. So if
Well, I
anybody has
think we
questions,
actually probably need to end, but
Okay.
then you can't stick around, so
yeah,
let's do
yeah,
that.
for sure. And I took down the slide, but you can find us on the internet, and Mary has some of my business cards, so if anyone wants to get in touch or find out more or sign up for the newsletter or whatever it is, please let me know. Thank you guys.